All right, so we're going to try to trace the first question in the lab. That's lab 8. That's also a question that was given on a midterm, second midterm. So we're going to go over that trace and make sure that we have an understanding of basic objects and object inheritance. So when I look at this code, you'll have it in front of you. Take a look at the classes. First, we have class A. So class A is abstract. It has a protected attribute. It has a constructor, and it has a toString. Nothing static, no main, there's nothing to do here, but it's important to understand the structure. The second class, B, which extends A, so there's a class inheritance. It has a constructor, it has an overloaded constructor, and it has a toString method. Again, nothing to do here, so we proceed to the next class, which is class C. Now, class C looks like it's a wrapper class. It contains a main method, which is a public static void main, so that's where I start. The first line of code is B array declaration equal new B size 3. So this is where we're going to start. So when we look at it, we are in main. So the scope is that we are inside a function called main. So all of this is going to happen inside main. So what is inside main? So if we look at this line, the first line in main, three things happen. First, we're declaring the variable b, little b. It's of type b, which is an array. Then we say new b, so we're going to instantiate the array object. So this is going to reference to a new object, and this is essentially an array 0, 1, 2, because it's size 3. So that line will create the instance. Now note, however, it only instantiates the array object. It doesn't instantiate the actual object inside each element of the array. So we proceed to the next line. The next line, it says b at index 0 equal new instance of b. So basically, first, this is the reference. It's going to refer to an object, an instance of type b, and we're going to instantiate this object. So I look at class b, but remember that class b extends a. So if you're going to have a class b, you must have class a along with it. So I'm just going to make a little mark here that this is the b and this is the parent class a, and they all comes at one package when you instantiate b, because b is a, just like you say a palm is a tree, so you can't have it without a. It's part of the is a relationship in inheritance. All right, so what happens now? In b I have an attribute little b, which has no value yet, and in a I have an attribute little a that has no value yet. There's no default values in this code. So now, step 1, we created the reference, already exists, pointing to the objects. That's the second step. We instantiated the objects. And the third step is now we're going to run the constructor. Now, which constructor? If you look at the line, it says new b brackets, which means I'm going to call the default constructor of b. So looking into the class b, inside, we're going to run this method, b. So inside it, the first line says super bracket 0. So the super class is this one. We're going to call the overloaded constructor of the super class because it takes a parameter 0. So we're going to call the constructor, the overloaded constructor a. And if you look at that, it has a little local variable little a. Don't confuse it with the other a. This is a member, and this is a local variable inside a function. So what's the value of little a? It's going to be 0 because we said super 0. So we work from there. So now we are executing the code inside the overloaded constructor of a. So the first line says this.a. This is always a reference to this instance, this self. So this.a is the attribute. Now what about it? It's equal to a plus 1. So remember, I'm in this function. What's a? A is 0, a plus 1. Store that in this dot a, so that's going to be 1 inside this attribute. So this dot a is equal to the 0 plus 1. All right, so that's the only line that is available inside the overloaded constructor. So I finished that constructor. I'm out of it. I'm back to the constructor of b. So inside b, this is the default constructor of this instance. We already executed super 0, and then we came back. Now it's going to say b is equal to 0. That's the second line in the constructor. So we're going to put 0 here. Now we're done with this method. Now we're back to main and ready to go to the next line. So the next line says b at index 1 is equal to new b, and we're going to call the overload constructor with parameter 4. So b at index 1 is going to refer, it's a reference to a new instance. Let me guess, this is type B, and there's a whole other instance A that comes along with B. I'm only doing these little labels so I can tell which one is B, which one is A, so I don't mix them up. So remember, A is the parent of B. So what are we going to do now? When we created this instance, look again at the template. So class B has an attribute B, and class A has an attribute little a. Okay, ready? Now let's call the constructors. So which constructor? We're going to call the overloaded constructor B with the parameter 4. So B with the parameter. So if we look at the parameter here, it's called a local variable B. It has a value of 4. This B came from the parameter name of the overloaded constructor. So what are we going to do in this line? It says this brackets. What does that mean? It's always the first line, by the way. This super, they always must be the first line in the constructor. So it's going to call the default constructor B. Remember, there's an overloaded constructor and a default constructor. So when we put this, it calls the default constructor. So we're going to run the default constructor. The first line in the default constructor for B says super 0. So we're going to call the overloaded constructor of A, which has a parameter little a, and it's going to have a value of 0. Okay, so now we're inside the overloaded constructor in class A, and we're going to say this.a. This.a is this a. The attribute is equal to a plus 1. So there's a, which is 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. Put it here. Okay, done. So this is it. Is there anything else in that? No, that's the only line in A. So we're going to exit this function. And now we're back to the to the default constructor where we called it, where we called super 0. So the second line in this method is b is equal to 0. B is equal to 0. There's no b in here, so it's this b up here. It's equal to 0, and this method is done. Now we're back to the overloaded constructor where we started. So basically, we called the overload constructor, which called the default, which called the overload constructor in A, went back to the default, now back to the overload constructor. So let's finish this. So the first line was this, which we did it. The second line is A plus equal B, meaning A is equal to A plus B. So I'm in here, I'm looking for A. There's no A here locally. There's no A in the attribute. There's an A. As long as it's public or protected, I'm good. And you check, it is protected, so you're good. You can actually access it. Remember, when you inherit, whatever attributes you have in the parent class, they're yours to use, provided they are not private. Okay, so let's go back to the line. It says, let's see, A plus equal B. So I can sometimes on the side and think about it. A plus equal B really means A is equal to A plus B. Just a note to self. So let's take care of it. So what is A? A is 1. What is B? Now remember, I'm in this method, so B is 4. So 1 plus 4 is 5, and we're going to store this in A. So A plus equal B will store 5 based on 1 plus the 4 in here. Okay, this is it for that method. So we're going to exit the overloaded method. Now we're back to main, and now we're ready to run the third line in main. So, the fourth line in main. This is where we have a separate variable, little a. It's of type A, and a little a has a new instance of B. Overloaded constructor, B of 5. So again, there's B, there's A. I'm just going to label it to myself so I remember that this is the instance of B, that's the instance of B. The instance of B has an attribute called B. The instance of A has the attribute of A. So whenever you instantiate, you always set up your structure, and now you execute the constructor. So which constructor to execute? It's the one for B, the overloaded. So we're going to run the overloaded constructor. So kind of like a repeat of what we did here. It has a local variable B, and the value of that attribute is going to be 5, because it says in the code A little a is equal to new B 5. So that 5 is going to come here. Okay, so let's execute the overloaded constructor. Looking at the code, the overload constructor, the first line says this, which means it's going to execute the default constructor. So let's do that. What's going to happen in the default constructor? The first line says super 0. So it's going to call the overloaded constructor of the super class, big A, which has a local variable parameter called A. It's going to have the value of 0. Okay, so what about it? Let's run this method, the constructor, the overloaded constructor of class A. So it says this.a, so this attribute is going to have the value of A plus 1. So there's A, because it's local in the method. So A is 0, 0 plus 1 is 1. We're going to copy it here. So that's good. And that's all we have to do. So this exits. And now we're back to the default constructor. So what's happening in the default constructor? We did the super 0. Check. Now we're going to say B is equal to 0. There's no B in here. So it has to be that one. B equal to 0. This method is done. We're back to the overloaded constructor. So let's finish the overloaded constructor. If you remember, the first method was this, which we took care of it. Then the second line is A plus equal B. Remember that one? So A is equal to A plus B. So let's take a look. Where's A? It's 1. Where's B? It's 5. 5 plus 1 is 6. We're going to put this over in A. So this is going to be 6. All right. So we're done with this method. We're back to main. So going back to main, we finished the line where we instantiate B as a type of A. Now notice in that line, it's kind of tricky because on the left side, it's of type A. On the right side, it's of type B. But remember, B is A. That's inheritance. So the two types are compatible, truly polymorphic. So going on to the next one, B at index 2. Let's see, B, I'm in main. There's B at index 2. There it is. It's going to be equal to A. And that's an explicit cast to convert it of type B. So in other words, two references that are equal to each other, that means they refer to the same object. So if we're going to take the value of whatever A refers to and copy it here, that means B at index 2 also refers to this object. Okay, so that's the setup. Now we're going to see the outputs. Okay, so we're going to run the printout, which is System.out.println, and it says B at index 0. So I'm in main. There's B at index 0, this one over here, and dot B. So there, dot B. It's public, so we're good. So what about it? Well, that's 0. Okay, so the output zero. So that's a print line. So we're good. We're now ready to go to the next line. So the next line we're saying B at index 1 dot B is this one is equal to B at index 0 dot B, same one. Okay, I think I messed up. B at index 1 dot B is this here, and B at index 0 dot B is this one here. So we're going to copy B at index 0, B plus 5 times B2 at index 2 dot B. So let's break this down a little bit. So I'm going to write this on the side just so I can monitor it. Let's find a spot. So let me write it just here, just for reference. So B at index 1 dot B is equal to B at index 0 dot, let's see, it's a dot B plus 5 times B at index 2 dot B. So this is the line that we're given. So what are we going to do with it? Of course, we're going to do the multiplication first. So what's the value of B at index 2 dot B? So B at index 2 dot B is 0, 0. 5 times 0 is 0. B at index 0 dot B, B at index 0 dot B is 0, plus is 0, so that's 0. Easy. So then B at index 1 dot B is equal to 0. Well, doesn't change. So this line basically has no impact on changing anything there. So if you do it right, you shouldn't have to change anything. All right, so next line, System.out.println B at index 0. Okay, this is again like reading a map. I'm in main, There's B at index 0. But what is at index 0? It's the entire object. Ooh. So how do we print that? Which means, in order for us to print an object, you're going to execute the toString of this object. Do we have a toString for this object? Of course. So let's take a look at class B. I'm looking at the toString of class B. So right here, what are we doing? First line, it says A++. So I'm here, I'm looking for A, no A, no A, there's the A. So A++, so this one becomes a 2. Okay, next line. B plus equal A, meaning B is equal to B plus A. So B, okay, is equal to B plus A, 0 plus 2, 2. Third line, return, oh, gets juicy. Return super dot toString. So now we're calling, remember toString is an override, so now we're overriding the override. So we're calling the toString of A. This method right here. So this toString, we're going to call it, and it gives us back a string. So what is this toString? Okay, well, let's read it. It says return A colon plus A. So it's going to ultimately display A colon. Now what is A? 2. 2. So it's going to return, so this is done. It's going to return to this toString, which is going to return B colon. Remember, it says toString of this one plus B colon B. So B colon B. So I'm here, I'm looking for B, it's 2. That's the first line of output. Okay, so System.out.println B at index 0 gave us this. Now the next step, it says plus new line \n. So I'm here. And now we're going to print the next string, which is B at index 1. B at index 1, well, that's an object of type B. So we're going to call the toString. So we're going to call the toString of B. And again, we're doing this over again. So what's the first line in toString inside class B? It says A++. I'm looking for A. There's A. That becomes 6. Then I say B is equal to B plus A. B, there you go. It's equal to B plus A, 0 plus 6. So that's going to be 6. Return super dot toString. So we're going to call the toString of this method, of this instance, sorry, of A. So what we're going to do is going to call this toString, which is inside class A. So if you look at it, it says return A colon plus A. A colon. So I know it's the return is going to send it to the printout output, so we can just print it right away. So what is A? A is 6. Now this is done. It comes back to this method. What happens in this method? This is a toString that's inside class B. So remember, we said return super.toString, and now we're going to have to plus B colon plus B. So B colon, and what's the value of B? There it is, 6. Okay, that is done. Next, so now we're on the last line inside main. It says System.out.println B at index 2. B at index 2. Again, that's an object, so we have to call the toString of this thing. So we're going to call the toString here, and what's going to happen, we look at the toString inside B. See, notice that why we always trace the objects and not the code, because some people write their output on the code there, but because the code is going to run multiple times under different circumstances. So right now we're doing a toString. See, notice we ran it here, we ran it here, now we're going to run it here, but for this kind of instance. So the toString in here, it's going to say A++. So where's A? There's A. That's going to be 7. B is equal to B plus A, or B plus equal A. So B is equal to B plus A. That's going to be a 7. Return super.toString. So we're going to call the toString of this instance. And the toString of this instance is going to say return A colon plus A. So where's A? 7. This is done. It's going to come back here. So the toString inside B says plus B colon B. So B colon, where's B? 7. Done with this. Now I'm back to main. So plus new line \n, and then we're going to print A. So I'm in main. I'm looking for A. Remember, that was A right there. Okay, so there's A here. That's this object. So guess what? We're gonna do this all over again. So we're gonna call the toString of A. Now, this is tricky because which A are you talking about? A was defined of type A, so we're gonna call the toString of the entire object. Okay, so again, we're gonna call the toString of B, and it says, let's see, the toString of B says A++, that's gonna become 8. And B is equal to B plus A, so 8 plus 7 is what, 15, and that's gonna go in here. And then we're gonna return the super.toString, so we're gonna call the toString yet again of A, that's a superclass. So we're gonna call the toString, and what does the toString do in A? It says A colon plus A, there's 8, it's 8. Okay, so that's done. We're back here. So we continue, it says plus B colon plus B, so B colon plus B. Where's B? It's 15. And this method is done. I look in main, we're done. So all of these instances now exit, and we exit main, and this is our final output. Okay, so make sure you show your work. Always show your trace. These are the instances. This is the scope. They live inside main. These are the methods we call. These attributes. Whenever you create an instance, make sure you show the reference pointing to the object. You set up the structure, and then you follow the traces. You execute whatever constructor necessary. As long as you organize your data structures like this, you make sure any cryptic code you work with, you show your output clearly, you get full marks. If you only show your output and your output is wrong without showing me your trace, you don't get part marks. So it's very important that you work out your trace. There's no way for me to just produce the output without doing this trace, which represents what's inside memory. Okay, so good luck with it, and it takes a lot of practice. If you want to practice again, what you can do, go back to the code, change a few numbers. You can always compile it and run it and check your answer to see if you got it right. But if when you vary it, you get to practice with different values, with different techniques, try to change things around and see what you get. All right, so I wish you good luck with it until the next exercise.